obey this, drink it. Funny, isn't it? How people hesitate the moment a command sounds absolute. The mind starts racing. What is it? Why me? What happens if I don't? But that's the thing about obedience, about surrender. It's not really about the drink at all. It's about what happens when you let go of control, when you stop questioning every detail and step into the unknown. People think they're free, but most of them are already drinking something every day. Lies, routines, excuses. And they do it without a second thought. Yet the second you place a choice in front of them, they panic. Obedience reveals who truly holds control. People walk around pretending they're free, pretending they're making their own choices. But most of them are just puppets, tugged by invisible strings. Society tells them what to do, what to wear, what to eat, when to speak, when to stay quiet, and they obey without question, without resistance. They tell themselves it's normal, that it's just the way things are. But deep down, they know the truth. Obedience always exposes where the power really sits. You can trace control by following the trail of who bends and who commands. And when you're asked to obey, when you're told to follow without hesitation, that's when mask slips. That's when you see the real chain wrapped around your neck. Think about it. From the moment you were born, you've been taught to obey. Parents, teachers, bosses, leaders. It never ends. Each one giving orders, each one demanding obedience, and you learning the rhythm of compliance. Sit here, stand there, say this. Don't say that. You thought you were learning discipline, but what you were really learning was where you fit in the hierarchy, because obedience is a test. It reveals whether you're the one giving orders or the one swallowing them whole. And most people, they're content with swallowing. It's easier. It's safer. It saves them from responsibility. But in the process, they give away the very thing they claim to value most: control over themselves. The funny part is how blind people are to their own obedience. They'll scream about freedom while obeying every trend, every headline, every whisper of authority. They think because they choose which brand to buy, which mask to wear, which side to argue on, that they're free. But choice doesn't mean freedom when all the choices are designed by someone else. Obedience hides in plain sight. You think you're sipping by your own will, but really, someone else poured the glass. And every time you raise it to your lips, you confirm confirm who's really in control. And fear is what keeps obedience alive. People don't obey because they want to. They obey because they're afraid of what happens if they don't. Afraid of punishment, rejection, loss. Afraid of being outcast. Afraid of the unknown. So they drink, they follow, they bow. They convince themselves it's the smart choice, the safe choice. But safe is just another word for shackled. And the more you obey, the tighter the chain grows, until you can't even tell if you're obeying anymore, or if obedience has simply become who you are. But here's where it gets interesting. Obedience doesn't just reveal who has power over you. It reveals who you are willing to give that power to. Every time you obey, you're making a declaration, whether you realize it or not. You're saying, this voice matters more than mine. This command carries more weight than my will. It's not about the action, it's about the surrender. And most people surrender so easily, so quickly, it's almost pathetic. They don't even question who they're obeying or why. They just bow, sip, comply. And in that blind obedience, their control is gone before they even notice it was stolen. Now, not all obedience is forced. Some of it is chosen. And that's where it gets dangerous. Because when you choose to obey, when you willingly hand your will to someone else, you think you're still in control. You think, I decided to follow, so I'm still the one pulling the strings. But no, that's the trick. The second you obey, the second you kneel, the second you let someone else dictate your next move, you've revealed the truth. You're not the one holding the leash. You're wearing it. And the deeper you go, the harder it becomes to tell where their command ends and where your own will begins. That's why obedience is the ultimate test. It shows who's strong enough to resist and who's weak enough to follow. It doesn't matter what the command is. It could be as simple as drink this, or as complex as live your life this way. The act itself is irrelevant. What matters is the power exchange. The one who obeys loses a piece of themselves. The one who commands gains it. And if you pay attention, if you really look, you'll see that every society, every relationship, every system is built on that single exchange. The ones who sip without thinking, and the ones who tell them to sip. The obedient and the obeyed. And once you see it, once you recognize it, you will never be able to look at the world the same way again. Fear is louder when choice is regret. It's easy for people to drift through life when the path is vague, when the rules are hidden behind curtains and delivered in whispers. They nod, they follow, they conform without even realizing it. But put a choice directly in front of them, something sharp, something undeniable, and suddenly fear screams in their head. They start shaking, second guessing, overthinking. It's not the action itself that terrifies them. It's the responsibility of knowing they chose it. Because when you decide, when you take that step, you can't hide behind excuses anymore. You can't point fingers at the world, at your parents, at society. It's you. The weight of your decision presses down like a hand around your throat, and that's why fear gets louder. Most people claim they want freedom, but what they actually crave is safety. Safety in routines, in patterns, in someone else making the hard calls. They want to believe they're in control while quietly obeying a script written long before they arrived. But then, once in a while, life corners them. It drops a choice right in their lap. No escape, no delay, no middle ground. And that's when you see the truth. That's when you see the trembling. Because choice strips away the illusion. It forces you to admit who you really are when there's no one left to hide behind. The louder fear grows. The smaller people shrink. They tell themselves stories to justify it. What if I fail? What if I lose everything? What if I regret it? The mind invents monsters that don't even exist just to avoid stepping forward. But here's the catch. Those monsters only roar when you're standing at the edge of choice. They vanish the moment you move. They're not real. They're echoes of your own hesitation. Still, for most, those echoes are enough to paralyze them. They'd rather stay trapped in the comfort of indecision than risk the weight of a choice that might redefine them. Direct choices are dangerous because they mirror back the truth. You see yourself naked, stripped of the excuses and distractions. You realize that most of your life, you've been a passenger, letting someone else steer. And now, for once, the wheel is in your hands. No one to blame if you crash, no one to thank if you soar. That's the burden of real freedom. It comes wrapped in fear. And that fear, that voice screaming in your head, it's not trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you small, contained, predictable. Fear thrives in cages, and choice rattles the lock, and yet, without choice, there's no transformation. Without that confrontation, without the deafening roar of fear. You never really see what you're made of. That's why so many live in shadows. They never faced a direct choice that demanded their courage. They drifted from one influence to the next, one authority to another, sipping whatever was poured into their hands without ever asking if it was truly theirs. They escaped fear, yes, but they also escaped themselves. Because the self is only revealed in those moments when the choice burns hot, when the decision cuts deep, when fear is screaming and you either step forward or collapse. You see, fear being louder at the moment of choice isn't a weakness. It's proof that the choice matters. If you weren't on the edge of something real, there'd be silence. No trembling, no shaking, no overthinking. Fear is the announcement that you're standing before something that could change you. And most people misinterpret it. They hear the noise and retreat. But the ones who understand, they hear the noise and grin, because they know it's the sound of a door opening. The louder the fear, the bigger the door, and the bigger the door, the more different the world will look on the other side. But remember this: when choice is placed directly before you and fear fills the air, someone is watching. Not a person, not a crowd, not a judge. Yourself, the real you. The one that doesn't care about excuses or stories. That self is waiting to see if you'll obey the fear or silence it. And in that moment, all the illusions, all the masks, all the noise of life fade away, leaving only the question, will you choose? Or will you hide one moment can rewrite the whole story? People like to think their lives are built out of years, decades, long stretches of time that slowly add up into meaning. But that's not how it works. It only takes 1 second, one choice, one collision of events to flip everything upside down. The rest is just details. You could spend years building an identity, crafting a routine, pretending you're safe inside the walls you've made, and then snap, it all burns because of one moment. That's the truth most people can't stomach. That their whole existence is always dangling by a thread thinner than they care to admit. Think about it. Every person you've ever admired, every legend, every story that people pass down, it isn't the whole life they remember. It's the moment, the instant they broke the pattern, the second they shattered expectations, the choice that defied the script. That's what echoes, not the endless repetition of safe, comfortable days. Those vanish into nothing. It's the moments that stand out, the ones sharp enough to cut through time, that define everything after. And the terrifying part, you never know when it's coming. You never get a warning. It sneaks up on you, disguises itself as something ordinary. And then everything shifts. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid those moments. They stick to the middle, the predictable, the routines that guarantee nothing explodes. Because if nothing explodes, they think they're safe. But what they don't realize is safety is just another word for stagnation. You can't rewrite your story from the middle of the script. You rewrite it by tearing a page out and throwing the pen across the room. But that takes risk. That takes facing the possibility that the story you've been telling yourself all this time is nothing more than a lie you've been obediently living in. And here's the cruel joke. Those moments usually don't prepare. Those moments usually don't ask permission. They don't wait until you're ready. They show up uninvited, brutal, uncompromising. A goodbye you didn't expect. A betrayal you didn't see coming. A chance you never thought would land in your lap. Suddenly, you're standing at the crossroads, your heart pounding, and you realize nothing will ever be the same again, no matter what you choose. That's the power of a moment. It's a wrecking ball, smashing through everything you thought was stable. You can try to patch it up, glue it back together, pretend it didn't happen, but deep down you know, the story has already been rewritten. What's fascinating is how blind people are while the moment is happening. They only see it after, when they look back. They call it destiny, fate, divine timing. But while it's unfolding, they're too caught up in the chaos, too busy clinging to their old version of life to notice that a new one is being carved right in front of them. That blindness is what separates those who rise from those who collapse, because some recognize the moment for what it is, a doorway, and others see it only as a disaster. Same moment, different story. One person steps into the unknown and is reborn. Another stays paralyzed and spends the rest of their life haunted by what could have been one moment can take away everything you thought mattered. And in that loss, it can hand you something bigger than you ever imagined. Pain and opportunity wear the same mask. That's why it's so hard to see clearly when it happens. You want to hold on to the old, even as it crumbles in your hands, because it feels familiar. But the truth is, The old story has to burn for the new one to be written. And that burn hurts. It sears. It scars. Yet those scars are the proof that you didn't just exist. You shifted. You collided with something real. You survived the rewriting. And here's the part that people can't stand. One moment doesn't just change you, it reveals you. It shows you who you really are beneath the mask, beneath the lies you tell yourself to sleep at night. When the world cracks open, when your story is forced into a rewrite, you either fight to stay the same or you let go and become something else. That's why a single moment carries so much weight. Because it isn't just about what happens. It's about what it drags out of you. And whether you like it or not, once it happens, there's no going back. The page is already inked. The story is already shifting. And you're no longer who you were before transformation. Never asks for permission. It doesn't knock politely at your door. It doesn't send you a warning letter. It doesn't care about your schedule or your fragile little plans. It arrives like a storm, uninvited, ripping through the walls you thought were permanent. And here's the truth most people can't accept. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't care if you're comfortable. It comes when it wants, how it wants. And all you can do is decide whether you'll adapt or break. People hate that. They want control. They want to believe they're the authors of their own timelines. But transformation laughs at control. It doesn't negotiate. It demands you see. That's why so many resist it. Because transformation doesn't care about your comfort zones. It doesn't care about your excuses, your fears, your stories about why you're not ready yet. It shows up, slams everything down, and says, now. And when that happens, most people panic. They claw at the old version of themselves, desperate to glue it back together, pretending it can all go back to how it was. But the old you is already gone, already ashes, already irrelevant. You can't stitch dead skin back onto a living body. The moment transformation arrives, what was before becomes obsolete. But people cling anyway, and in that clinging, they suffer more than they need to. Transformation has no patience for weakness. It strips you down, takes away your comforts, crushes your illusions, and dares you to rebuild from the rubble. And here's the dark joke. It doesn't care if you succeed. It doesn't care if you collapse under the weight. It doesn't care if you cry, scream, or beg. Transformation doesn't stop just because you're scared. It keeps moving, relentless, merciless. The only question is whether you'll move with it or be buried by it. That's why it feels so brutal, so unfair, so overwhelming, because it is. It doesn't hand you a choice about whether it comes. It only hands you a choice about whether you'll rise with it. And people always misunderstand this. They think transformation is supposed to feel good. They imagine it's some gentle unfolding, like petals opening in the sun. No, that's fantasy. Real transformation feels like death, like tearing skin, like drowning and gasping for air you don't think will ever come. It feels like losing everything, because in a way you are. The old you dies so the new one can live. That's why it hurts so much. That's why it feels like betrayal. But it isn't betrayal, it's rebirth. And rebirth is never polite. It's violent, it's raw, it's bloody, but it's real. And nothing real ever comes without cost. Strange thing about moments like this. You're sitting here, watching, maybe thinking it's just another voice, another set of words drifting into the noise of your day. But what if it's not? What if this, right here, is the spark, the trigger, the domino that tips the whole line? People never notice the shift while it's happening. They think change announces itself with fireworks, sirens, grand parades. No, it creeps in, quiet, disguised, hidden inside something ordinary. And then, suddenly, everything's different. Something big doesn't knock on the door. It slips through the cracks. And once it's here, nothing in your life will ever fit the same way again. Small sparks ignite the biggest fires. People always imagine that change comes like a storm, loud, violent, impossible to miss. They think it'll crash into their lives with thunder and lightning, warning them, giving them time to prepare. But that's not how it works, is it? Real change, the kind that burns everything down and rebuilds it, almost never announces itself. It slips in quietly, disguised as something small, something ordinary. A single word, a decision, a choice you didn't think twice about. A spark so small you could have ignored it, but you didn't. And that tiny spark, that barely noticeable flicker, becomes the fire that consumes everything you thought was permanent. It's almost laughable when you look back. How something so insignificant could carry so much weight. You'll remember the moment clearly. The look, the sentence, the chance encounter, the thought that wouldn't leave you alone. At the time, it didn't feel big. It didn't feel like destiny knocking. It felt like nothing. But that's the trick. Sparks don't roar. Sparks don't shine. Sparks are small, fragile, almost invisible. And yet, when they land on the right place, the dry wood of your doubts, the fuel of your frustration, the cracks in your heart, they explode into something you can't stop. That's when you realize it was never about the size of the spark. It was always about the fire it had the potential to unleash. And isn't it funny how people ignore sparks? They brush them off, laugh at them, dismiss them as just a thought or just a feeling. They underestimate the little things, and then they wonder why their lives never change. Because they're waiting for an explosion, when all it takes is one flicker, one decision, one shift. The irony. Most people don't miss out on big change because it wasn't offered. They miss it because they were too blind to notice the spark right in front of them. Too distracted, too afraid, too busy clinging to the comfort of their old flames, even if those flames have already gone out. But once the fire catches, oh, there's no stopping it. You try to control it, contain it, keep it small, manageable. But that's not how fire works. It spreads. It grows. It devours everything that stands in its way. And the more you resist it, the more it burns. At first, it feels destructive, painful, like the spark betrayed you. You'll watch parts of your life turn to ash, and you'll hate it. But then, slowly, you realize what the fire was really doing. It was clearing space, making room for something new. And suddenly, the destruction feels less like chaos and more like liberation. The fire wasn't here to kill you. It was here to burn away what couldn't survive anymore. And the best part, you never see the full fire when you're staring at the spark. You can't. It's impossible to predict how far it will spread, how much it will consume, how much it will transform. That's why it feels so absurd. How can something so small hold so much power? But that's the nature of sparks. They don't carry the fire inside them. They carry the possibility. They carry the seed of something unstoppable. And it's only when you let them land, when you stop brushing them off, that you see what they're truly capable of. So maybe the real strength isn't in chasing explosions, but in paying attention to the sparks, the quiet whispers, the gut feelings, the little decisions that feel meaningless at the time, because those are the things that light the path. Those are the things that rewrite your life when you're not looking, and when the fire finally rises, when it engulfs everything you thought would last forever. You'll trace it back to that tiny moment, that fragile spark, and you'll laugh, because the biggest fire you've ever known was born from the smallest flicker you almost ignored hides inside the ordinary. That's the cruel trick of it all. People expect change to come crashing in with drama, with noise, with flashing lights that scream, here it is." But the truth, it wears a disguise. It slips in quietly, wearing the mask of routine. You think it's just another day, another conversation, another choice you've made 1,000 times before. Nothing special, nothing important. But somewhere inside that ordinary moment, the ground shifts. You don't notice it right away. You never do. Only later. When everything's different. When everything's burning or rebuilding. Do you look back and realize that was it? That was the moment it all began. It could be something as small as a word. Someone says something, and it lands differently this time. Or a decision you make without thinking twice. Take the left street instead of the right. Sit in the back instead of the front. Say yes when your instinct whispered no. Tiny things. Insignificant, right? Until the ripples start. Until that single choice collides with another, and another, until suddenly the whole picture is unrecognizable. That's the joke. Life doesn't need a grand stage to shift. It just needs a crack in your routine. A crack so small you don't notice it until it's already torn the whole thing apart, and people miss it all the time. They walk through their lives blind, waiting for a big announcement, waiting for fate to show up with fireworks and neon signs. And because they're waiting for the spectacular, they ignore the subtle. They dismiss the ordinary, not realizing that the ordinary is where change hides best. It's camouflage. Because if you saw it coming, if you knew the exact moment everything would turn, you'd fight it. You'd resist. You'd try to control it, stop it, bend it to your will. So life keeps it hidden. It smuggles change into the cracks of everyday moments where you're too distracted to notice what's really happening. And when it hits, when you finally see the shift, you feel betrayed. You look back and think, how did I not notice? How could I have missed it? But that's the point. You were never supposed to notice. You were supposed to stumble into it, blind and unprepared, because only then does it do its work. Only then does it rip away your certainty, tear at your comfort, force you into a corner where you can't escape the transformation. Change is a thief, and the ordinary is its perfect disguise. You invite it in because you don't recognize it, and by the time you do, it's already rearranged everything. And isn't it ironic? The moments you shrug off, the ones you swear mean nothing, end up meaning everything. The conversation you barely remember becomes the turning point. The mistake you thought was small becomes the lesson that reshaped you. The routine you thought was harmless becomes the chain you're forced to break. Change doesn't live in the grand moments. It thrives in the unnoticed ones. The whispers, not the shouts. The cracks, not the explosions. That's why it feels so shocking when it finally arrives. You didn't see it because you weren't supposed to. You weren't watching because you thought there was nothing to see. And yet, when you look back, the signs were always there. That strange feeling in your gut, that sense of something shifting under the surface. You ignored it because it didn't scream loud enough. But the ordinary is where the extraordinary hides. That's where it waits. In silence, in disguise, until the right moment to show you what it really is. And by then, it's too late to turn back. You've already stepped into the new. You've already crossed the line. And the ordinary day you barely noticed becomes the day you can never forget. One moment can rewrite the whole story. That's the part nobody likes to admit. How fragile their little timelines really are. People walk around with this illusion that their lives are solid, stable, set in stone. They draw out their futures like blueprints, convinced that if they stick to the plan, nothing will break. But it only takes a second to rip the whole script apart. One word, one choice, one accident, one confession, and suddenly, the story you thought you were living is gone, torn up, replaced by something you never saw coming. It's almost laughable how quickly it all can change. Think about it. You could be walking down the street, lost in thought, carrying the weight of your so-called destiny, and then, bam, a phone call, a glance, a decision to turn left instead of right. Something so small, so ordinary, and yet it rips through your life like a knife. In that instant, the person you thought you were, the life you thought you had, dissolves. The story you've been telling yourself gets rewritten. whether you're ready for it or not. And the cruel part, you never see it coming. You never get the warning. Because if you did, you'd try to stop it. You'd cling to the old script. But that's not how stories work. They don't ask for your permission before they change direction. And isn't it strange how much power a single moment can hold? We act like our lives are built on years of effort, years of choices layered on top of each other. And sure, that's part of it. But the truth is that 1 second can undo all of it. 1 second can burn down a decade of certainty. And that second doesn't care about how much you've invested, how much you've sacrificed, how much you've prayed. It would all stay the same. The second doesn't care. It comes, it flips the table, and it forces you to face a new story you never wanted to read. That's the part most people can't handle. They want life to be fair, predictable, controllable. They want their stories to follow neat little arcs. Beginning, middle, end. No sharp turns. No sudden edits. But the real story, the one you're actually living, isn't neat at all. It's jagged. It's chaotic. It's written in ink that smudges. Tears gets rewritten mid-sentence. And one moment, just one, can change the entire meaning. What you thought was a tragedy becomes a comedy. What you thought was safety becomes a trap. What you thought was the end turns out to be the beginning. That's the madness of it all. 1 second. And you're not the same character anymore. Most people look back at their lives and can pinpoint it. The moment. The conversation that changed everything. The mistake that turned into an awakening. The failure that cracked them open. The betrayal that forced them to become someone harder, sharper, stronger. At the time, they didn't know it was happening. They thought it was just another page in the book. But looking back, they realize it wasn't a page. It was the rewrite. It was the pivot. It was the second that split their life into before and after. And here's the real punchline. Sometimes the moment doesn't look dramatic at all. Sometimes it's quiet, almost boring. You don't realize its weight until much later, when everything has shifted and you finally trace it back. You see that it wasn't 1,000 little steps that changed your story. It was one step, one instant, 1 second of courage, or 1 second of weakness, 1 second of chance. That's all it takes. And the entire story you thought you were living is gone, replaced by a new one that doesn't care if you like it or not. So maybe the truth is this: you're never as safe as you think you are. Your story isn't locked. It's fragile, breakable, and one breath, one choice, one accident can rip it wide open. That's terrifying to most people, but it's also freeing. Because if one moment can destroy everything you thought you were, then one moment can also create everything you never thought you could be. A new era demands sacrifice of the old self. People like to cling to their masks, their routines, their illusions of who they are. They build this identity, this fragile little shell, and then they hold onto it like it's eternal. But when the tide shifts, when something bigger comes knocking, that version of you can't survive. It's too small, too weak, too tied to a world that no longer exists. And that's the cruel part. You don't get to carry the old self into the new era. You have to burn it. You have to let it die, piece by piece. If you want to step forward, of course, most people fight this. They try to drag their old skin with them, convinced they can blend the past with the future. They cling to old habits, old fears, old excuses. They whisper, "I can change without losing myself." But that's the biggest lie of all. You can't change and stay the same. You can't step into something new while gripping the bones of who you used to be. Every new version of you requires a funeral for the old one. And the deeper the change, the heavier the sacrifice,